I had a paramedic supervisor back in the 90s who had 20 years in EMS and had a reputation for being a tough guy with a big heart. He told us a story that raised the hair on the back of my neck one day, and I will never forget it. In 1981, he was an EMT for a volunteer fire department in a New Hampshire farming community. In this town lived an elderly brother and a sister along with an elderly cousin on a sprawling farm. They were very well liked by the townsfolk, and they would offer a plot of their farmland to anyone for the asking with one simple rule. No matter what they grow, they had to donate 1/3 of their yield to area food banks. This was just one of the many reasons why they were so beloved. As they got older, Mary, the sister, became very frail with osteoporosis and was admitted to a nursing home. John, her brother, was left to look after the farm. One day, the cousin who lived nearby was unable to reach John by phone and became very concerned. He went to the farm and entered the house. He discovered John in an upstairs bedroom, unconscious, suffering from a stroke, and he immediately called 911. Word of trouble at the farm spread very quickly, and soon the sirens was blaring, notifying volunteers inside the town. The town's police and BLS ambulance raced to the farm. An ambulance from an adjoining community was also dispatched. My boss was one of the EMTs responding and was very familiar with this family. When he arrived, he said he walked into the house and was told to hurry as CPR was underway. As he entered the front hall, on his left was a sitting room, and inside that room, he noticed an elderly woman sitting in a rocking chair smiling back at him. He thought how peaceful and happy she looked. It was a bit odd given the circumstances, but he then recognized her. It was Mary. They get John to the ambulance and transported him to the hospital, where he was pronounced on arrival. As my boss was filling out his report at the nurse's station, he made a comment to one of the staff on how sad it was that Mary was well enough to finally go home, only to have John die like that. A staff member gave him a strange look and asked, "What are you talking about?" My boss said how great Mary looked inside the house. He was then informed that Mary had passed away the day before at the nursing home and could not possibly have been at the farm. Thinking he mistook someone else for Mary, he asked around about who the female was at the house. There was no females during the call. All the responders were male. He then described what she was wearing, including an oversized set of pearls and a pink flowered dress to the staff. The dress was Mary's favorite. He had no doubt that the pleasant elderly woman who gave him a warm smile was indeed Mary. 2 days later, my boss and his then girlfriend decided to attend the wake for John and Mary, as Mary had been his girlfriend's grade school teacher. As my boss walked into the funeral home, he gazed over the coffin holding Mary and nearly fainted. For there was Mary, wearing her favorite pink flowered dress and the oversized pearl necklace, exactly as she wore 2 days earlier at the farm. Several years ago, I took a 911 call for a family reporting that their teenage daughter was possessed. They claimed there was no possibility of drugs or a history of mental health issues, which I of course didn't believe for a second. Family members were holding her down, and I could hear 2 people screaming at each other in the background. I asked the caller to tell whoever was yelling at her to stop. The caller then said, "It's her." I responded and telling them I knew it was her, but whoever was yelling at her at the same time to stop. The caller again said, "It's her. Both voices." I kid you not, it was the creepiest thing I've ever heard. I've been doing this for 25 years and have heard many things. I know of man's inhumanity and the horrible things people do to each other. But this was a different kind of evil. I was clearly hearing a young girl screaming, and at the same time, an adult male was yelling back. I couldn't understand either language, but they were both clearly 2 different voices. The family swore both voices were coming from her at the same time. It made my skin crawl. The lieutenant listened to the tape later. He looked at me and said, "Do you ever wonder?" "Yes." Yes, I do. As a deputy sheriff, I was working in a rural town approximately 20 minutes from the main city in my county. At approximately 0130 hours, I was dispatched to a traffic accident in a canal. I arrived on scene with CHP to find an overturned vehicle inside an empty canal. No driver or passengers in sight. At first, we figured the driver left the scene after the TA. But after getting a closer look, the canal floor was muddy. There were no foot impressions leaving the vehicle. We lit up that canal and took a side and then started walking down to see if anyone had been ejected. We were about to give up when I stopped and looked over to the CHP officer on the opposite side of the canal. I asked if maybe the body was under the car. My flashlight was angled down into the canal and caught the bottom of 2 shoe holes with the body of a man covered in mud. I wouldn't have seen if it wasn't for his clean soles. Being a sheriff coroner, I set out to notify his next of kin. I finally found an old address for the man, and this was approximately 0330 hours. It's an old cluster of trailers at the address, and none of the trailers had address numbers on it. So I'm just walking around looking for address numbers, or maybe I can find a car I could run to get an idea of what trailer he may have lived in. I eventually found a car with paper plates next to a trailer. I went to the side and attempted to run the VIN when I heard, "I've been waiting for you." Startled, I turned around and shined my flashlight onto the porch. An elderly Hispanic woman was sitting in a rocking chair in the total darkness of that porch. "I'm sorry, I'm looking for," I said, and she replied without emotion, "I know. My son died about 2 hours ago." I confirmed her son's name and asked if there was anyone with him. She said, "No, he was alone. He went to a party and had too much to drink." I asked how she knew he passed, and she responded, "At 1:30 he came to me when I was sleeping to say goodbye, and that he was sorry. He told me a young cop found him and would be visiting me soon. So I got up and sat on the porch to wait for you." I told her that I was sorry for her loss and left. I tell this story all the time, and every single time my hair on my arm stands up. Myself and a buddy on a squad responded to an alarm. The incident location was an old office-type building that had been converted into a doctor's office. There's a pharmacy attached to it. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. Key holder arrives on scene and we go in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that, of course, the key holder didn't have keys to, so we took an elevator up to the 2nd floor. Not the most tactically sound option, I know. The elevator opens up to a pitch black hallway, except for one overhead light at the end of the hall. We start checking doors, and so far they're all secured. We get to the last office, and sure enough, the door is unlocked. We make entry and observe it to be an unused office. The door opened to a sizable waiting room and reception area. There were about 10 or 12 exam rooms, all cleared with no hiccups. We exit the building and immediately something just seems off. That's when I realized the overhead light at the end of the hallway that was on was now off, replaced by another light over by the elevators. I look over at my squad mate and he is completely white. I ask him what is wrong and he says, "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" I tell him, "Yeah." So then my buddy says, "Well, now they're all standing open." Sure enough, those offices that we had just checked, every single door was now standing open. That pucker factor sinked in at this point. So we start clearing the offices and securing offices. We finish the last office and on our way out, just before we turn the corner to get into the waiting area, the main door just slams shut. Then our radios start going nuts with some kind of static feedback. Now I just want to get the hell out of here. We get back into the elevator and head down to the 1st floor to make contact with the key holder again. However, That key holder is nowhere to be found. I contacted dispatch, asking for the number to request a callback for the key holder so I can advise him of what we just found. Dispatch states that the key holder was still en route to us, and advising an ETA of 5 minutes. I advised dispatch that we had already been out with the key holder. Dispatch requests I give them a call. I call dispatch, and she tells me there's no way we were out with the key holder. She states that the alarm company had only just made contact with one. Eventually, the real key holder arrives on scene, and I ask her about the man that had just let us into the building. She asked me to describe him, so I did. She states, that sounds like one of the doctors that used to lease the office around the second floor, the one at the end of the hall. She then states, that same doctor had committed suicide in his summer home several days ago. I still won't go back there. I worked as a police officer in a small town in rural Nebraska. Back in the 90s, I was patrolling through town in winter. We had several abandoned houses in town, but one seemed to have the attraction of copper thieves, so we were told to keep an eye on it. I drove by it around 7 p.m., and since it sat on a corner lot, I had a clear view of all 4 sides of the house. As I drove around the corner, nothing looks out of the ordinary. Around 2 hours later, I drive by again, and the back door is now wide open. Now I know that the back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground around the house, there were no footprints, so I think, what the hell? I call dispatch and tell them I'm investigating an open door at the address, and ask for a county sheriff to start my way. I walk to the open door, pull out my flashlight, and shine it inside. The house has obviously been gutted for the most part. The plaster walls have been torn down and debris piles lie everywhere. Since there were no footprints in the snow around the door, other than mine now, and with all the dust on the floor not showing any footprints, I just chalk it up to the wind, or maybe the door just opened up on its own. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump come from upstairs and what sounded like kids laughing. So I then enter the house and yell out, "Police department! Come downstairs!" Then more of what sounds like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there's kids inside this house, and I start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are, all the while cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times I hear something upstairs. Since I've had no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I hear what I swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs and it all gets quiet. The upstairs is relatively small, with the hallway at the top of the stairs that has 1 bedroom on the right and 1 straight ahead at the end of the hall, and 1 more on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump on the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the door, and it's just an empty room with a small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. Not kidding. Sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a child's book with the picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs, and got the fuck out of there. I relayed to dispatch that there was nobody inside the house. I locked the back door and never went back there again.